everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're doing my March and my April reading wrap up, and I feel like overall March and April were really good reading months for me. I read 9 books, I want to say, but one of them was a graphic novel, so basically 8 books. And I read so many genres, had ratings from all across the board. So without further ado, let's just talk about it. I did check my Goodreads before this, and I read about half of the books that we're going to talk about on my Kindle, and the other half I do have physically. So let's go in order. I feel like that's definitely the best way to do this. So the first book that I read in March was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This was a reread for me. One of my goals in 2024 is to reread this entire trilogy. I've talked about it a lot on this channel, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. It is like my favorite fantasy series though. And essentially we follow this magician named Kel. His magic is rare. It's not common to meet someone like him in this world. And the magic system in these books is also really unique. Essentially, there are 4 parallel universes, and each of these parallel universes is in London, and each London has different amounts of magic within them. And so Kel, our main character King, can travel between these parallel universes, and it's super rare. And we get to follow him and his journey, and he meets some really fun people along the way, and I love this series so much, so I did give this 5 stars. It was a reread. If you've been around here for a while, you know I love this series. It's so good. Okay, the next book that I read in March was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. If you guys didn't see the reading vlog where I read this, I'll try to link it on the screen and in the description box down below. I did like a mood reading vlog through my physical TBR, something like that. This book was stunning, masterful, beautiful. I loved it. This book basically follows 2 best friends named Sam and Sadie who meet as kids in the hospital under some unfortunate circumstances, and they come together over their love of video games, and they ultimately grow up together, like in and out of each other's lives, and go on to create a video game or multiple video games together. And it just has this amazing ability to focus on like flawed humans while still creating lovable characters, and how we can go on to like make these same messy mistakes over and over again. And yeah, I won't dive into it. I talked about it in that vlog. I have another video coming out where I bring this book up again because it's just so good. But I also gave this 5 stars. 2024 has been a crazy year. I don't give 5 stars out very often. It's just not what I do. And of course, I'm giving my rereads 5 stars, but this one was a new one and I loved it. So shout out Grace for gifting me this because I love this. I fully annotated it. Yeah, if you like literary fiction, I would give this one a shot because it was so good. Oh, this one's fun. Okay, this has not been talked about in a video yet. So the next book that I read was All That's Left in the World by Eric Brown. I did this as a book club with one of my childhood best friends. We try to do it every month. It doesn't always work out every month, but we kind of put together the books on our radar, find a book that we're both interested in, read it and talk about it, basically a book club. This was his pick and I really, really enjoyed it. So this book follows Andrew and Jameson. It's a queer post-apocalyptic novel, like sci-fi post-apocalypse, but also like identity and romance. It was just like a combination of things that I'd never read before, but I really, really enjoyed it. And like I said, we follow Andrew and Jameson, and they are navigating the world post-pandemic. This pandemic came, it swept through, and pretty much everyone in their lives is now gone, and they are on this journey to find a better life. Where do they go? And that's kind of all that I'll say about that. It's kind of fun to learn things with our characters. But of course, there is this romance that brews between Andrew and Jamie. I overall had a really wonderful time reading this book. There were definitely points in the book where I connected more with one of our 2 main characters. It's also dual POV, so you get a good glimpse into both their heads and their minds, and you know, them struggling in, again, this post-apocalyptic, post-pandemic world, and they're on this journey and they meet a bunch of people, not necessarily good people, along the way, but they're also coming to terms with their own identities and how they feel about themselves and each other. And I just really enjoyed this. I wasn't sure how I would like it, given that we are still dealing with the consequences of like a pandemic that really happened in this world. So yeah, but I actually was not bothered by that. I really enjoyed it. I thought the romance was really sweet, and it is the first in the series. I do plan on continuing the series. I think the next book comes out in May, June, sometime soon. I would definitely recommend that one if you have not read it yet. Then I read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. You guys might be able to tell. I was definitely in my literary fiction, straying away from some of my more usual genres we're still in March at this point. And I also really enjoyed this one. Yellowface by R.F. Kuang was a really interesting story. It was just told in a way that I'd never experienced before. We basically open the story and the book with two main characters. You have Athena Liu and June Hayward. And right at the beginning of the story, we know that they're both authors, and Athena's career took off extremely early on. She's a very well-known, renowned author. And June, her work hasn't really gotten picked up. It hasn't gone the best for her, but they're friends, kind of surface level friends, but friends nonetheless. And at the, again, very beginning of the book, Athena, our successful author queen, dies. I think that might even be the first line of this book. Let's see. The night I watched Athena Liu die, we were celebrating her TV deal with Netflix. Talk about a banger of an opening line. Anyway, it takes maybe 25 pages for June to steal Athena's manuscript that she has been writing and, take credit for that. To me, I always have a very interesting time reading from main characters' perspectives who you just hate. Like, you know that you are not supposed to like June. She's problematic, and the whole time she is pretty much trying to justify all of her actions, which is interesting because you have to keep yourself accountable as the reader. And I just thought that the topics in here that were covered were very approachable. Things like cancel culture, things like race and racism, and who has the right to do what, things like that. I thought they were all handled in a very approachable way. So yeah, this book was really, really good. I rated this 4 stars. There were points that it dragged, and there were points where I felt like it was a little bit too on the nose. Like, our author was really trying to make sure that we understood what was going on, And so I thought there could have been a little more nuance, if that makes sense. But overall, I did really enjoy this story. And if you're not really into literary fiction, I feel like this is a good place to get started because there's mystery that kind of keeps you interested the whole time. Like, weird things start happening and you're like, okay, what the heck is going on here? And yeah, I really liked this one. I had a very good literary fiction coded March, and I'm very happy about it. All right, then I did jump back into my fantasy era, and I read Aaire by Sarah J. Maas. This is technically the 3rd book in the Throne of Glass series. Because it's the 3rd book in a series, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I struggle with this every time. Basically, I had previously read about 3 years ago the first 2 books and like maybe a third of this book. And then I put it down and never got back to it. And again, that was like 3 years ago, long time ago. And so another one of my 2024 goals was to reread and finish this entire series. So this was fun because this was the first book in the series that I got to go into and then reach a point that I'd never experienced before. So about 300-400 pages of this book were completely new to me. And I annotated it. I just love annotating books. I do. It's just something about it just feels so right. But I honestly haven't known what to rate this book pretty much since I read it. I really enjoyed it. I love this whole world and just the feeling of like jumping into a fantasy world where you know all the characters. It feels like a warm hug, You don't have to do a lot of work because you already put the work in book 1. But I would say, without spoiling anything, the world really does expand a lot in this book. We meet a lot of new people. You can see that things are getting set up for the next book. And so I think I'm pretty excited about Queen of Shadows because I feel that the groundwork was really being put down in this book. So I think I'm gonna land on a 4 stars. Also, the end of this book like cracked my heart in two. Without saying too much, just cracked, splattered, threw it on the floor. I was not doing well. Like fully, I was on a train in Peru coming back from Machu Picchu, literally one of the wonders of the world, okay? And Sarah J. Maas was just breaking my heart in two. So yeah, I think a 4 star feels good for this one. I liked it. It wasn't my favorite in the series, but of course it was great because it was Sarah J. Maas and that woman can do no wrong. Then I began my cowboy romance era. All right, I think this is when we enter into April. I read Flawless by Elsie Silver and I had fun with this one. I feel like the idea of cowboy romances just really gets me excited. They've been going around for a while and I just like I hadn't dipped my toes in the water yet for that, but I finally decided to in April. That book did get chosen in my TBR wheel video, and I enjoyed it. It wasn't perfect, but like it was exactly what I needed at the time. Flawless is this cowboy romance book. It takes place on like is it a ranch? I think so. It takes place on a ranch, and this book follows a famous bull rider named Rhett, and I forget our female main character. I forget her name, but Rhett has been making some poor decisions in the public eye. And so he starts losing fans, he starts losing sponsors, and he needs that support as a famous bull rider. And so he basically gets like an agent or this girl put on his case, who is our female main character. And she's like, look, I can't leave your side because you need to start acting like a man and start being mature so you don't lose all your sponsors. So she's kind of like his babysitter, or at least that's how he sees her at first. And I felt like this book started off really, really strong. I liked Rhett. I liked our main character. I loved the setting. The cowboy aesthetic, I'm very into it. However, I think as the book progressed, it just slowly lost me more and more. I didn't feel like it was the most reasonable, not to say that what Rhett was experiencing and our FMC were experiencing were not valid, but I just could not sympathize with some of the things that they were experiencing. And again, with this one, I just felt like at times we were a little too on the nose. Without saying too much, I just felt like the way that I was able to connect with the characters just kind of faded over time. And so it gave what it needed to give. I enjoyed it. I'm definitely going to continue the series. It wasn't my favorite romance ever. So I did rate that one 3 stars. It was good. I would absolutely recommend it. I'm hoping that I like other books in the series more. And yeah, that's that. It was good, not great. I understand the hype though. Also, that's Kindle Unlimited for anyone interested. That is again why I don't have it. Then I mixed it up. I love nonfiction. I just don't talk about nonfiction a ton on this channel because I don't know. I worry that people aren't that into nonfiction, but I try to read at least a few nonfiction books every single year. And so I read Talking with Strangers. The title goes on and I kind of forget it. So Talking with Strangers, What We Should Know About People We Don't Know. And this is by Malcolm Gladwell. This is my second book by this author. I read Outliers by him either last year or 2 years ago. Talking with Strangers was a really, really interesting nonfiction book. Something that I will say about this author is he has this incredible ability to string together an argument. So in this book, Gladwell is basically arguing that for such a social species, we are so bad at reading and communicating with the people that we don't know, with strangers. And he opens the book with this, it's a pretty sad book the whole way through. All his case studies, all his examples are pretty depressing, so fair warning. He opens with this court case, I guess is the best way to sum it up. And he says, okay, I want you guys to remember this court case. Kind of talks us through it a little bit and then we kind of forget about it. And he goes through the entire book sharing different anecdotes and case studies and court cases that help us to understand how humans aren't great at understanding people. And then he ties it all together. He uses everything that we've been learning throughout the entire book to break down this initial case that he brought up at the very beginning of the book. And I thought that very like cyclical nature was really, really incredible. I thought he did such a good job with that. And again, I just think learning about humans and the way that we think is really, really interesting. For instance, one of the themes in here was talking about how it seems that humans have this truth default where generally we assume that people are telling us the truth. So in a lot of studies, it showed that people couldn't tell when someone was lying because we just assume that they're telling us the truth. Of course, we wouldn't have a functional society if we just assumed that everybody was lying to us all the time. So it makes sense, but to kind of get into it a little bit deeper was really interesting. But if you're interested in some nonfiction that's not difficult to read, like functionally difficult to read, I would recommend this. Yeah, I thought it was really good. I don't rate nonfiction, so just know that I recommend it. Then the next book that I read was a graphic novel. So at the end of April, I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, I did start to enter into this reading slump. And that is because of the last book that I'm going to talk about. I started reading this book and I just could not get through it. I was trudging. And so I ended up like not really reading much for the last 2 weeks of April or more. I was pretty much just listening to books. And so I was just scrolling through Libby, which is the library app that I use, checking what was available. And I saw that the Heartstopper graphic novel was just available to check out. And I was like, oh, I've never read a graphic novel before. This could be a horrible reading experience on my Kindle, but I'm going to try it nonetheless. So I checked out the first graphic novel of the Heartstopper series. I think it's called Volume 1, and I ate it up. On the Kindle also, it was so nice. There was no issues for me reading it in Kindle form versus the physical book. And so I blew through Heartstopper Volume 1. I am now starting Volume 2, and so good. I just thought it was so lovely. I don't remember our main characters' names. Unfortunate, but we follow these two boys in high school, and one of them has come out as gay, and we pretty much see him like falling for this boy who's on the rugby team. They become really good friends, but this boy on the rugby team is very seemingly straight. All his friends are telling him that he's a straight boy, don't fall for this straight guy, but we know as the reader that our other main character, King, whose name I can't remember, is not straight. And we also know that he's going to fall in love. Is it with Charlie? No, it's Nick and Charlie. Okay. We know that Nick is going to fall for Charlie too. We just know. And I just loved it. I thought it was so cute, and it was exactly what I needed. And pretty much all the graphic novels are available on Libby right now. So I'm just going to keep checking them out and keep reading them on my Kindle. I think I would give this 5 stars. It was really good. I would recommend. Then the last book, I'm kind of scared to talk about this. The last book that I read in April, I'm actually currently filming a fantasy reading vlog. So you're going to get to see more of my opinions on this book. I just don't know when that's going to come out because there's one more book that I need to read for that video. And that book that I read in April that I liked but didn't love would be Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This was tough for me because I felt like there were elements of this book that were 5, 6 star for me, but there were also elements that were like 2 star, 3 star level for me. And so it left me kind of confused in terms of how I wanted to rate this. I think I'm going to end up giving this about 3 stars. My camera just randomly stopped recording, so I'm gonna try to get through this last book pretty quickly. Basically what I was saying is that in this world we have 2 main characters, Peyton and Kai, and where they live there was this disease or plague that swept through, and in its dust it pretty much left people with powers, either wonderful powers, mundane type powers, and no powers. If you are powerless, you're called an ordinary, and the king basically decides ordinaries are bad. They all should be dead. And so Kai works for the king. He is the prince, and his job is to kill ordinaries, aka kill our main girl, Peyton, who we love. And so we follow their story. There are these trials called the purging trials, and they kind of compete for their lives and stuff like that, you know, classic romantic-y stuff. And I think what was difficult for me is I loved the romance, the tension was perfect. Like, I've never experienced a romance so good. Like, I loved it. The banter, the tension, it was exactly what we want, you know? But everything else, the world, the plot, it just felt like things I'd seen before. And I know some people don't mind that at all. Like, the fact that it's not new is not going to bother you. And so I would still recommend this. I just felt like everything that I was reading was some variation of another popular book that I'd read before. It was like The Selection meets The Hunger Games with really good romantic tension. And so, yeah, I just felt myself getting bored, and I didn't think that the characters really had to work for anything. Any information that they needed would just kind of fall in their lap. Things would kind of work out perfectly without anyone, working that hard for it. So I am giving this book 3 stars. You can see more in my fantasy reading vlog that's coming out eventually. Yeah, I'm so sad because I know that people really love this book, and I thought that I was gonna be one of them, but I wasn't. And that was honestly devastating. So anyway, these plus the other 5 books that I talked about are all the lovely books that I read in March and April. I'm filming this a little bit early, so there's a chance that I'll finish like another Heartstopper graphic novel or 2 before the month ends. But other than that, I don't think that I'm gonna accomplish anything super big before we hit May. Also, leave your name and your comment down below. I love getting to know you guys a little bit better. Let me know what you're hoping to read in May, and also if you had any good finds in March or April. And yeah, I think that's it. I hope you guys are having a great day and a great reading month, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!